time for Overtime.
Stop what you're doing and listen.
In the world of sports, it's all about the playmakers in today's headlines, from locals to the pros, with interviews from local standouts and sports all-stars across the country that will have you talking.
Oh, my goodness. Touchdown.
Hear from coaches to players, sports analysts, and broadcasters who are a part of the action every day. Overtime, now with Bert Rameen on ESPN 102.3 AM 1000 KSOO, Sioux Falls sports leader.
Welcome. A wonderful Thursday in the sports world. The return of the NCAA men's basketball tournament. Sweet 16 action tonight. Women's tournament resumes tomorrow around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It's opening day, people, for Major League Baseball. All you baseball fans, baseball nuts out there, congratulations and happy opening day from the bottom of my heart. Now, I put all confidence aside. I put all pride aside. And out there on Twitter this morning, I know Dustin Baker's probably already seen it. He did retweet the thing after all. Picture of yours truly. I'm probably 10 years old in the picture, and I did not intentionally troll the Twins today by wearing a Kansas City Royals cap. It was my Little League cap, Little League team. We were the Discovery Royals, but you can see me at age 10 hitting dongers, hitting dingers out there in Colorado Springs wearing my get up for opening day out there on Twitter. Welcome into this Thursday Major League Baseball opening day edition of Overtime. On the show today, Dustin Baker in for the entirety of hour number one. We'll be talking Minnesota Vikings. We'll be talking the quarterback that's not named Caleb Williams that is getting an extraordinary amount of love over the last couple weeks to push him into the top 10, maybe into the top 5, and maybe into the top 2 of the NFL draft at the end of April. We're just about ready to flip the calendar page on to the month of April. We're less than 1 month away from the NFL draft in Detroit. We'll get you the latest and greatest Vikings news, the latest from the NFL. We'll talk about the rule changes, favorites, and maybe some potential issues that Dustin Baker thinks might pop up with some rule changes in the NFL, latest Vikings draft chatter, and then we'll talk a little baseball, favorite baseball movie, and if Dustin plans to take the Dodgers or the field this year. Dodgers odds have slumped just a little bit with the Shohei situation, but the Dodgers continue to buy and spend, including a mega deal to lock up one of their own within the last 24 hours in baseball. We'll talk about that to round out hour number one. Hour number two, baseball odds roundup. Everything you need to know about Major League Baseball season before it officially gets going. Division odds. Are the Twins the likeliest team to win the AL Central? Yes, they are. We'll get you the latest odds there. Win totals for every team across baseball. I'll pick 5 that I like, over or under, and I'll give you my projection for where the Twins could end up this season. Hit you with the good, the bad, the ugly, and we round out today's show by talking with former guy who used to be here in the studio, Jerry P. He used to have this job sitting in front of the board talking with JT all the time. Jerry P. of the Sioux Falls Sports Authority, USD Coyote play-by-play for women's basketball, will hop on the show to talk about the Yotes and their continued run into the WNIT, but we'll also be talking about the big NCAA Ice Hockey Regional that begins this afternoon into this evening and Saturday at the Denny Sanford Premier Center. Tickets still available right now at the Denny Sanford Premier Center box office or at DennySanfordPremierCenter.com. Into your scorecard now as we lead off this Thursday edition of Overtime, taking a look and listen back on NHL hockey. Just 2 games yesterday. Senators beat up on the Sabres 6-2, and it was Tampa Bay with a 3-1 victory over Boston.
Right point, Lilleberg shoots wide right. The rebound was an open net for Point, but it skipped over his stick. Lilleberg shoots again, right point, wide right. Rebound, Point behind the net. Score! The wraparound! Braden Point! The Lightning go back up 2-1.
We talked with Anna Dua of the NHL last week saying that the Tampa Bay Lightning are the most dangerous team right now in the NHL, especially in that Eastern Conference. They proved it last night, taking care of Boston 3-1 the final. Boston falls to 42-17-15. Tampa with the win, 40-25-7 on the season. Audio there courtesy of WFLA. Tonight in the NHL, we got a jam-packed slate for you. Begins at 6 o'clock. Blackhawks are in Ottawa against the Senators. ESPN Plus, the broadcast there. Red Wings at Hurricanes, 6:30. Flames at Blues, 7 o'clock. Same time for the Wild, home to San Jose at 7, ESPN Plus. Rangers at Avalanche, must-see TV, 8 o'clock on ESPN Plus. And the Kings and the Oilers, 8 o'clock start time, also streamable on ESPN Plus. Wild day, wild 48 hours, really, in the NBA. Last night, Golden State over Orlando, 101-93. Wiggins goes for 23 points in the win for the Warriors. They're 38-34. And the Clippers eke one out on the road in Philly.
Leonard and Oubre set the jump. The ball is up. Leonard wins it. Batum taps it to Hield at half court with 2. Right wing Oubre. He drives. He didn't get up in time. That's going to do it. The Clippers survive in Philadelphia. 108-107.
45-27, the new record for LA. That audio AM 570 LA Sports. Other finals, the Bulls continue to stupefy people. They win games they're not supposed to win. They lose games they're not supposed to lose. And something in between, something's got to give for Chicago. 35-38 with a beating up of Indiana at home. 125-99. Bulls on top there. Lakers continue to stack up the W's. 136-124 winners in Memphis last night. And Minnesota keeps on winning as well. They notch win number 50 on the season last night over Detroit.
Turnover, J-Mac with a steal. J-Mac controls front court to the right side, and Jaden, left-handed dribble, runs it up in the lane. The shot hits the front rim and trickles in. He drew the foul.
106-91 the final. Naz Reid, 21 points and 10 rebounds. Minnesota wins and moves to 50-22 with a 106-91 win over the Pistons. Elsewhere, Houston doing Minnesota a big favor and doing themselves a big favor down the stretch of the season. The Rockets, of all teams in the NBA, they've won 10 straight games.
Ladies and gentlemen, in downtown Oklahoma City, it's going to be the 10th consecutive Rockets win!
Absolutely love it. It is great to be a Rockets fan right now. 132-126 the final. Rockets are 37-35. They trail Golden State just by 1 game for the final playoff spot in the Western Conference, taking care of the Oklahoma City Thunder on the road. OKC with the loss, identical record as the Timberwolves, 50-22 on the season. Here's head coach Ime Udoka on what's clicking down in Houston.
I didn't have the pain of the last 3 years of all the losing, and so obviously it means a lot to them. Obviously myself as well. 10 in a row, regardless if Shea is out or whatever the case may be.
Big deal for Houston. Again, the final 132-126. Phoenix over Denver last night, and that helps out the Timberwolves as well. 104-97 the final. Kevin Durant, a huge game for the Suns.
Booker to the high post. Outside Durant. Squares for 3 and drains another. Kevin Durant with a 28-point night in Denver.
Kevin Durant would finish with a 30-point night in Denver, 30 rebounds and 5 blocks, 104-97 winners. Denver 51-22, Phoenix 43-30 on the season. Tonight in the NBA, Celtics at Hawks, Bucks at Pelicans, the only 2 games in action, 6:30 and 7 o'clock respectively. Bucks and Pelicans you can watch on NBA TV. Sweet 16 NCAA tournament on the men's side returns tonight, beginning at 6 o'clock. Clemson and Arizona, 6:30 San Diego State and UConn. Christian Laettner says the Huskies are the best team left in the tourney.
I just love the way UConn plays. You can say that they seem to be a little old schoolish. They slow down at times. They pass ahead and they can play fast and fast break. They still shoot their three-pointers. But, man, they're the best team in college basketball last year, and this year they look really, really good. And I love it because Danny Hurley is making them play the correct way. Danny Hurley is getting some of his kids to stay so they can build on that culture, and they're just a great team, and it's because of him, and they have some juniors and seniors on their team, and it makes a huge difference if you ask me.
And, of course, the title from last year, one of the big impetus and one of the big draws in players staying within the program, transferring to the program. UConn, the top seed. They'll battle San Diego State, the 5 seed, 6:30 on TBS. Other 2 games tonight, Alabama and North Carolina, 8:30 on CBS. Here's UNC head coach Hubert Davis on his guys living in the moment.
Playing here in the Sweet 16 against Alabama in the NCAA tournament, this is something that our guys not only are used to or accustomed to, but it's a position that they want to be in. They want to be in those late game situations where not only do they have to come up with a shot or a free throw, but a rebound, a stop, a loose ball. Those are things that our guys enjoy being in those moments, and they look forward to them.
UNC head coach Hubert Davis. The other matchup tonight, a lot of local interest out of the Big Ten and, of course, Ames, Iowa, as Iowa State battles Illinois, 9 o'clock on TBS. Here's head coach TJ Otzelberger on his team and their confidence in the matchup.
We recognize the strength in our opponent and how great they are going to the offensive boards. They go with force. They're one of the top teams in the country. They've got multiple guys. They've got great size, length, athleticism. And so we recognize that strength of theirs. And yet we feel like on a daily basis, the things that we do prepare us for these type of opportunities. And we're confident in that plan.
Iowa State head coach TJ Otzelberger, if you gave me an opportunity to watch just one game tonight of those four, Clemson, Arizona, San Diego State, UConn, Alabama, North Carolina, or Illinois, Iowa State, sign me up for the final game between the Illini and the Cyclones, 9 o'clock on TBS. It's going to be good on good, athletic against athletic. Illinois has so many different scoring options, as we saw in the Big Ten title game win over Wisconsin, and Iowa State can jump out of the gym. They rebound well, great defense, and they can run as well. Going to be a great matchup, 9 o'clock on TBS tonight. Women's basketball, WNIT is set for a pair of Friday matchups. 7 o'clock, Minnesota plays host to North Dakota State, and 7:30, USD heads west to face off with Wyoming in Laramie. Sweet 16 for the women begins on Friday. Couple matchups there, Oregon State, Notre Dame, Indiana, South Carolina, NC State, Stanford, and Gonzaga, Texas are the four matchups for the Sweet 16 on Friday in women's basketball. And on to Major League Baseball. It is here, opening day, Twins at Royals, 2:30 pregame, 3:10 the first pitch time right here on your home for Minnesota Twins baseball in the 605 ESPN Sioux Falls. Again, 2:30 pregame, 3:10 start time. Other matchups today, Tigers at White Sox, 3:10. Yankees at Astros, same time on ESPN+. Cardinals visit the Dodgers in L.A. at 3:10. Cubs at Rangers, ESPN broadcast 6:35. Rockies visit Arizona, a nightcap tonight, 9:10 the official start time. Now quickly into the NFL, the draft April 25th through the 27th. Dan Graziano on if the Arizona Cardinals would consider getting rid of Kyler Murray in favor of a new quarterback this year.
I don't get the sense that Arizona, unless they are really, really convincing liars, I really don't get the sense Arizona is thinking about moving on from Kyler Murray. He's signed there. They like the way he came back from his injury and played, and I think they're full steam ahead with him. I'd be shocked, and I would be impressed with their ability to deceive if it turned out to be the case.
Arizona Cardinals holding that number 4 overall pick in the NFL draft coming up at the end of April in Detroit. Before we dive into the talk with Dustin Baker, just a quick headline of the day here. Carly Gustafson scored 16 points, and Gracie Schoenhoven added 14 and 11 rebounds, and Dort claimed the program's first NAIA championship with a 57-53 win over Providence of Montana on Tuesday night. Dort 35-2, appearing in its second national championship game in 3 years after losing in 2022 against former NAIA member Thomas More of Kentucky. And Providence was in the championship game for the first time in program history. Congratulations to Dort and Greater Iowa on a national championship. Now we go across the table to our buddy, our friend, our favorite Minnesota Vikings fan, Dustin Baker, at Dust Baker on Twitter. My friend, happy opening day, and good to see your face again this week.
Likewise, and this is a marker that the NFL draft is 4 weeks from today. I like to count it down for everyone, especially for the Vikings. This is like a grand climax because we started the offseason kind of unclear whether or not Kirk Cousins will be back. Some of us predicted that he would vamoose, and he did to the Falcons. And now, unless they have some undercover ardor for Sam Darnold, it feels like they're going to make another trade to go up the board, and we'll get a verdict in 4 weeks.
Did you absorb any or ingest any of the conversation with Kevin O'Connell or any other Vikings personality? Because O'Connell was on McAfee earlier this week, a couple other media appearances. What did you glean from commentary there? Because he did go to bat for Darnold, but again, who wouldn't go to bat for a guy you spent $10 million on? You do have other options in the draft, but it feels like, to me, they're going to draft a quarterback, right? But KOC a lot of good things to say about Darnold this week.
All of the Vikings leaders, starting with the ownership and to the general manager and to Kevin O'Connell in the last month, have said that they have flexibility. And they even say that after they signed Sam Darnold, after they traded with the Texans. And I think that is just telling NFL teams, like, yeah, we can do whatever we want. We don't got to trade up with anybody. But I agree with you that if they don't draft a quarterback in round 1 or 2, it would be really weird that the Vikings, it would be something the Vikings would have done 25, 30 years ago. Just say, hey, we got Sam Darnold. We could make him good. So I am firmly convinced that they will draft a quarterback. And on O'Connell's recent statements, the good thing about Kwesi Adolphus and Kevin O'Connell is they usually tell the truth. Like, if you follow the clues of their words, they don't do a whole lot of deception. So one thing O'Connell has said for the last 2 years is that inherently the first thing he looks for a quarterback is accuracy. Because as a quarterback himself, that was one of his weaknesses, and that's why he didn't last very long in the league. So I think it's near and dear to him. So on McAfee yesterday, he kind of all but ruled out Michael Penix. There was an awkward moment when McAfee talked to him about it, and he just paused, and he was like,
so Penix, huh?
Yeah, he was like, yeah, I guess. So I know that it's not a binary choice between Drake May and J.J. McCarthy, but the way the draft board is stacked and the spots that the Vikings can get up to via trade, it feels like a practical choice between Drake May and J.J. McCarthy. And for Drake May, it's basically, in my opinion, do you want to spend 3 first-rounders altogether? Or for J.J. McCarthy, do you want to spend 2 first-rounders? The interesting caveat about only 2 first-rounders is no matter what, the Vikings probably aren't going to be very good this year. If they're showcasing Darnold and a rookie quarterback, their ceiling is probably 7 and 10. Unless they have C.J. Stroud like with the Texans last year. So they're going to want to try to hang on to that first rounder next year. It'll be a top 10 pick. So there's a lot of storylines, but the price of the trade is one of the big ones.
J.J. McCarthy, 2-year starter, and in his 2 years there, 65% completion in 2022, 72% last season. That's really darn good, right? That's very accurate. Bo Nix, though, different level of accuracy. When you look at his stats last season, completed 77.4% of his passes. I'm not saying it's Bo Nix, but I'm saying you're looking for accurate. You're looking for playing within a system kind of guy. Bo Nix not getting any love really as a first-round guy, not a Viking guy. But I will tell you this, and we'll talk more about McCarthy and the reading of the tea leaves and all the speculation. There was a little bit of a hubbub made about the Vikings not attending the pro day out in Eugene for Bo Nix, but they didn't make it out to Ann Arbor either for the Michigan pro day. Is that concerning at all, or do you view it as a sign of the times? You don't have to go see him in person, and also you don't have to go out there and show your hand as to who you really love.
Admittedly, at the time, we thought that no Vikings presence whatsoever at Nix's pro day was good news, because everybody that comes on my Vikings YouTube show, Vikes Now, down the line says anybody but Nix. Like, just don't give me Nix. And so when we heard the Vikings weren't at his pro day, it was like rejoice. But as we've seen now, they don't have the 2 top guys, Kwesi and Kevin, at Jaden Daniels or probably today's and Drake May, because they have separate sessions or meetings scheduled with them. I don't know that they had that with Nix, and a lot of Nix's completion percentage is a byproduct of dinking and dunking, relatively speaking. He seems like a guy that would end up with the Broncos and Sean Payton thinking he could rekindle a Drew Brees type, and that way the Broncos wouldn't have to trade up the board. So I don't think Nix ends up as the quarterback. I'd have to find a way to get behind it. But on the pro day thing, yeah, I think it's diminished in terms of, hey, are the top guys there? If they're already having separate supplemental meetings with the top blue chip prospects, then that's kind of the pro day in itself.
And between Nix and Penix, those are the 2 guys that are 5 and 6 in that top 6 quarterbacks, respectively. And you can move them around. Some people have them in their top 1, top 2, top 3. But more than likely, the consensus is that Nix and Penix are the 5 and 6 right now. You mentioned Denver. I agree. That's a really good fit for Bo Nix. The accuracy, playing within the system, pretty darn good. For Penix, the landing spot that comes to mind for me might not be a glaring need, but Seattle has a quarterback need in the future down the line. Other teams that could be thinking future quarterbacks, New York. You also got Dallas and the LA Rams. What is another couple teams that might come to mind for you, or do you agree with what I said there for landing spots for those 2 guys?
Well, he'll be available to virtually everybody, is my opinion. I'm starting to think that we're going to see these 4 quarterbacks go off the board in the top 5, and then it's kind of an afterthought for Penix and Nix, and those 2 could be the Malik Willis like tumblers into round 2, or last year with Will Levis. Every team had a shot, and they said no. The Rams is particularly interesting because Stafford probably isn't long for this gridiron world. I think he's Cousins' age at about 35, 36. And if anybody can make him tick in a good way, it'd probably be Sean McVay. But I really like your Seattle one because Geno Smith is kind of in that, hey, he's a good quarterback purgatory. I don't know if he'll ever get any better than he was 2 years ago. So, yeah, I like the fit in Seattle, and I don't even remember where they picked, but I'm guessing they could splash and get Penix.
And again, the Seattle Seahawks, we'll check on that overall pick, but again, they could be a quarterback landing spot. There's a lot of teams out there that could draft a quarterback, maybe play it along for the future. And look out for Jordan Travis. I made mention to him a couple weeks ago with Dustin Baker in the studio. I do believe that Jordan Travis could go on to be a starter in the NFL. I might be wrong on that, but he was one of the Heisman frontrunners before he got injured and effectively took Florida State out of contention for the college football playoff. Look out for Travis to land in a spot like maybe Tampa or maybe Arizona or Seattle or the Rams, a place that doesn't need a quarterback right now, but they can work him into a system, teach him how to be a pro, get him healthy, and then you might have something immediately for your future. If you're starving for Vikings news, you're in the right place. Dustin Baker of Vikings Territory in for the entirety of hour number 1. When we come back, the latest and greatest in Vikings news, more on the J.J. McCarthy love, and any more moves on the horizon, including the latest on Dalton Risner. Coming up next on Overtime.
College hoops and NBA basketball, the NFL and Major League Baseball. It's all here on ESPN 102.3 and AM 1000 KSOO, Sioux Falls sports leader.
With you on this Thursday edition of Overtime, Dustin Baker of VikingsTerritory.com in the studio with us for his signature 1 hour on a Thursday. By the way, we're already working on twisting Dustin's arm. I didn't really have to twist his arm. He's excited about doing a double dip on draft week, Thursday and Friday, an hour each day. We'll do a mock draft, and then we'll see just how dumb we are on Friday when everything hits the news wires for round number 1. Again, Thursday, Friday, Saturday for the NFL draft. We'll have Dustin in for a preview Thursday and a recap on Friday to talk about what the Minnesota Vikings did, what they didn't do, if they drafted Bo Nix, if they drafted Jaden Daniels, whatever happens with the Minnesota Vikings, or what if they draft 2 players that aren't quarterbacks in the first round? There's so many different options for Minnesota. I think they're going quarterback, all kidding aside, in the first round with a trade-up. When it comes to the latest and greatest from Minnesota, I know there's some chatter out there about Dalton Risner, courtship, and that heating up. We'll start with Risner. What's the latest there that you're hearing and seeing and that's being reported? And then any other news and nuggets this week you want to get into in Vikings territory?
I'll start off by saying that Vikings fans adore Dalton Risner. I mean, the guy's only been associated with the team since September, but he feels like he's a decade-long veteran. He was pretty darn good last year with pass protection. I think we overinflate how good he was because he's a cool guy. But the news on him, and it came out of an article from The Athletic, was that he hired Drew Rosenhaus. He switched representation. This is since the start of free agency.
Yep.
I think he saw himself tunneling down a path like last year where you look around and you're like, why is nobody signing me? About 2 weeks ago, he tweeted that he doesn't want to get a big bag. He just wants respectable left guard starting salary. So with Drew Rosenhaus now in the mix, business should pick up. Risner's probably cooking with gas now.
Yep.
Kwesi Adofo-Mensah was asked about Risner on KFan about a week and a half ago, and Kwesi basically said, "Hey, we're gonna sign who's ever best for that spot." Usually, what he says if they're trying to get a guy back is, listen, we've had really good dialogue with his people. We'll continue to do that. He didn't say that at all. I think the ship has sailed on Risner in purple, which would promote Blake Brandel. Brandel signed for 3 years and $9.5 million at the beginning of free agency.
It's a good amount of money.
Yeah, and then the thing with this coaching staff is you have to trust them at offensive line because they have fixed the Vikings' doldrums from the Mike Zimmer era. So whether it's Brandel or they draft a left guard from round 4 or 5 or something, you have to give these guys a benefit of the doubt. Unlike the Zimmer regime where when they would sign Dakota Dozier or Drew Samia from the draft, you'd be like, oh, God. You don't have to do that anymore because the Vikings' offensive line since O'Connell arrived is pretty good. So I wouldn't expect Reisner back. It wouldn't shock me if he comes back. But one of the other little factoids is if he signs a deal for more than $3 million per season anywhere, the Vikings get their extra third-round compensatory. So they would have 2 in the piggy bank for next year, which they might need if they trade a bunch of stuff from next year's draft to get this quarterback we're talking about.
Absolutely true. And again, you can't pre-trade those picks in assumption that you get them. But when you get them, which is usually late February, early March is when they announce the official comp picks. Those are when they're tradable. Used to not be able to trade those as of a couple years ago. You had to pick with the comp picks, but you used to not be able to trade. Now you can trade those picks. So for you Vikings fans out there hoping for some draft compensation in the future, 1 third-round pick, maybe an additional 1. You could have 3 third-rounders next year in the draft, assuming that those continue to count for the comp picks moving forward. J.J. McCarthy, we talked a little bit about him and the other quarterbacks in the draft. The love for him right now is amazing. And it's not the media. I mean, it's the media, but there are so many different people that are out there, media, coaches, ex-coaches, everything like that. My wife and I have an extraordinary relationship. We're very much in love, but I can tell you one thing, matter of fact. My wife doesn't love me anywhere near as much as Jim Harbaugh loves J.J. McCarthy. It is palpable how much that dude loves that young quarterback. How much do you love J.J. McCarthy?
Not as much as Drake May. I am the Drake May guy in the Vikings community, and there are a bunch of us, but I will warm up in a hurry if it's J.J. McCarthy. The only difference between myself on McCarthy, like in relation to the rest of the NFL world, is I don't really give a damn that he won the national championship. Like, that's cool, but I'm not a QB wins guy, and therefore, if you had Drake May on the Wolverines, I'm pretty sure they would have won the national championship. But it seems that all of the NFL general managers, scouts, and then the media has been hoodwinked into believing because this guy was the QB1 of the national championship winning Wolverines, that he's going to do the same for your favorite football team. So it's a cool thing. I know that, hey, he's a winner. That's a great talking point. But I think that Drake May has more of the tools, the 6'5", 230 stature, and I just like the way he throws the football a little bit more than McCarthy. Now, there is a lot of folks, I'd say about 30% of Vikings fans that are the other side that think McCarthy is the guy. He's also a year younger than May. His attitude is fabulous. And the reason that I keep coming back to McCarthy as my prediction, even though I want May, is if you took a cookie cutter from Kevin O'Connell's personality, the eternal optimist, and you tried to pick a quarterback from this draft, that's a McCarthy. Like all of the happiness, like the guy had a smiley face on his shirt at his pro day. I really think that McCarthy is exactly like O'Connell in terms of culture, in terms of just being happy dudes. So that leads me to believe that when it's all said and done, the Vikings trade up to number 4, number 5, and get McCarthy.
So 4 or 5, you think is probably the trade-up spot right now. Of course, 4 is the pick of the Arizona Cardinals. They're open for business. And 5, Chargers should be open for business. They need to restock and retool. They got some tremendous salary cap issues, and they sent their 2 best receivers packing this offseason as well, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. I wanted to touch on something with you because we talk about quarterback measurables and being a dart throw in the first round. You mentioned Heisman winners. You mentioned national champions, people that end the game on top. Michigan, of course, J.J. McCarthy, national champion this year. Recent national championship quarterbacks that were drafted high, Cam Newton, you've got other guys in this bunch, including Jameis Winston, the aforementioned players across the board, Deshaun Watson, Tua Tagovailoa, Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow. It's a mixed bag as far as guys that end their college careers on top. As for Heisman winners, this list might even be a little bit harder to gauge and predict because these guys had the best season their final year in college or some point during their college career. Marcus Mariota, Jameis Winston, Johnny Manziel. You also got Lamar Jackson in there, Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Joe Burrow, Bryce Young, and Caleb Williams. And, of course, Jaden Daniels coming off a Heisman winner. That's also a mixed bag. So I don't necessarily think being at the pinnacle of the game as far as winning goes or being at the pinnacle of the game as far as accumulating the best stats and having the best Heisman-worthy season really equates all that much to top-tier success in the NFL.
No, it doesn't. And in fact, well, the first list you mentioned with all the national championship winners, that was pretty solid.
Yeah.
Like down the line,
And to be clear, Tebow's on that list as well, and Colt McCoy's on that list as well, Vince Young, and everyone else. There's a lot. It's a mixed bag, but I agree with you. It's probably stronger than the Heisman winners.
Yeah, I still can't believe that Tebow was a first-round draft pick. When I look back on that, how far have we come?
Yep.
But the thing about J.J. McCarthy, there's one thing that separates he and Drake May, and I don't know if this was a Michigan thing, but J.J. McCarthy is not a savant throwing deep outside the numbers. That would be his one weakness when you watch the tape. And then if you check the scouting reports from multiple dudes, that is his one thing. And I don't know, maybe I'm just paranoid from Josh Dobbs not being able to do that. And that kind of ended Dobbs' mania. Drake May doesn't have that problem. I mean, we just saw highlights here on the Pat McAfee show in studio where all of them were throwing outside the numbers deep. So in an offense that already showcased Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and TJ Hawkinson, I feel like Drake May's skill set and lack of weakness in throwing the ball deep, especially outside the numbers, is a better fit for these Vikings. And by the way, his high school coach works for the Vikings and Josh McCown.
One other comment that is apparent to me, and I watched a lot of Drake May because he was in that Carolinas area, went against Appalachian State a couple times. I'm really a fan of Drake May, and one thing to take in consideration, like we saw with Josh Allen, like we saw with Jordan Love, and a slew of other quarterbacks that had one final year in college that was kind of a it was kind of a letdown. More interceptions than the year prior, worse completion percentage. Drake May had no offensive line last year, had very little help there, and he had premier weapons the year before that and the year before that. So when he was at his best and he was protected, he was really, really darn good. This last year, he was not as well protected as he was in 2022 or in 2021. And for J.J. McCarthy, you think Michigan football, you're not saying, man, I can't wait to watch the Wolverines offense because it's boring. Mm-hmm. They run the ball, they set up great passes, they convert third downs, they grind it down the field. JJ's protected. They're going to have 3 or 4 offensive linemen from last year's team drafted this year. Drafted. 3 or 4. Couple in the first couple rounds. He had all the tools, had all the weapons. They'll have some receivers drafted. They'll have a slew of defenders drafted. Michigan really garnered a good team. And credit to McCarthy, he was great on a great team. But Drake May was great on a not great team last year. So something else to take in consideration there as we go to break on McCarthy and Drake May. We'll take the break. When we come back, we'll talk the latest NFL rule changes. How big of a fan is Dustin Baker of the new kickoff? Should they have gotten Cordero Patterson back in purple for this thing? We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the other reviewable items, the other rules that'll come down the pike. What is next? Should it be overtime? Should it be the fumbling through the end zone rule? We'll talk about that and much, much more, including some more Vikings talk coming up next on this Thursday edition of Overtime.
The best and coverage. We are ESPN 102.3 and AM 1000 KSOO, Sioux Falls sports leader.
Through this Thursday, March 28th edition of Overtime. For you baseball fans, happy opening day. We'll dive into everything you need to know about opening day, the good, the bad, the ugly, and more in hour number 2. But we're talking NFL. We're talking Vikings chatter right now with Dustin Baker of Vikes Now on YouTube, VikingsTerritory.com on the internet. And let's talk about NFL rule changes because I think it was a pretty surprisingly progressive week for a league that at times seems like they're living in the Stone Age with certain things. We get a new kickoff returners become more valuable. What say you about the new rules that were passed this week, including finally the opportunity to stop play and review the play clock expiration? That's a big deal for me.
Yeah, that was probably the coolest one. And then I think they said that you can, the judges in New York will review unnecessary roughing the passer?
Okay.
Yeah. Go back and check. I'm pretty sure they said that, which would be a dream come true. Let's see. On the rule changes on the whole, the hip drop one, I think was overblown. I don't think they're going to call that this year that much because...
I hope not. But I mean, again, I'm all for safety.
Yeah.
But the subjective nature of that and the over-flagging of that is just going to lead for clamoring to review it and make it reviewable next year. And I feel bad for the defenders in the NFL because they're not out to injure anybody. Most of them aren't. There's some bad eggs, as we know, but most of them are not out to injure people. But their job has gotten so darn hard since even the year 2010. But if you go back to 1995 or when Brady was young and he took that hit against the Bills that took his helmet off and he got up quickly, it's a different football game now. I feel bad for the defenders because they're delivering hits and they're bringing down ball carriers, but they're also at such a disadvantage because they got to avoid the head. They got to avoid the legs. They got to avoid the knees. They got to avoid this. They got to avoid that. They can't hit the head. They can't grab the face mask. Everything is so darn difficult for them, and they're also putting their bodies on the line in reception of those hits, too. So it's difficult for defenders in the NFL.
Yeah, and then they become the villain, too. If they get the 15-yard penalty, it's like, well, this rule's been established for 3 years, and you can't figure it out, buddy. Well, it's tough. It's tough not to be able to hit anywhere. Yep. One more thing on the ability to review, whether it's the time or I believe it is the roughing the passer item. It felt like in the last season, maybe the past 2 seasons, there's been more of that where the refs will quietly just change something. And I think they get radio in from New York that says, oh, no, hey, you screwed that up. Go ahead and fix it real quick. I wish there was more of that, like that there was this independent eye in the sky from New York that in real time that would save your coach's challenge. So anything they can do to put it more so in New York and they fix it on the fly, I love it. And then this kickoff thing, I think this is really cool. I've said before on your show, in life and sports, I love change. I love trying new stuff, shaking things up. And last year kind of sucked with the kickoff because it was like, well, why do they even want to bring it out?
And you are correct there. I think I missed that. But 2 days ago, Yahoo Sports with an article, NFL is going to allow replay assistants to review roughing the passer and intentional grounding because there's a lot of missed intentional grounding. I tell you what, I scream at my TV every single Sunday. Could be a Packers game, could be another game. How is that not intentional grounding? He's in the pocket. It didn't reach the line of scrimmage. He's within the tackle box, whatever it is. And they miss a lot of these, and the broadcasters make no mention of it. So I'm excited about the potential for that review as well. But pretty progressive rule changes, I think. When it comes to the kickoffs, it immediately brings some value to the guys that are really good returners. Cordell Patterson, Keyshawn Nixon of the Packers, a few others out there. But also, I think there's going to be a lot of gamification and a lot of interesting strategy here because you can start as the receiving team. You can start your players either 5 yards away or up to 10 yards away. And my question is, you watch the XFL, a lot of these players on the receiving team will retreat, which is traditional of the NFL kickoff of the past. You retreat, you form that wedge that's now outlawed, but you retreat, you kind of double team, you mix it up a little bit, and then you advance again. But if I'm the Packers, if I'm a team that's got a lightning quick guy or a really experienced returner, I'm just telling those guys 5 yards apart to go and run block and take that dude out of the field. I think it's man on man, good on good there, and you leave the kicker to tackle the return man. I'm telling those guys to run block. So I'm very encouraged and excited to see how teams approach that differently strategically this year.
Yeah, and the special teams coordinators, all 32 of them can start right now. Because it's coming. And I'm with you in terms of, because the Vikings have Kene Nwangu, who's one of the fastest players in the NFL, or at least he was before he started getting hurt. So I'm excited to see this change, mainly because last year was so blah. And one thing I would caution, though, so it's going to look a lot different as soon as week 1, that first Thursday night game. You're going to be like, wow, this is different. This is cool. But I'll caution, there wasn't like a bonanza of touchdowns in the XFL because of this. So I don't know why the NFL would be a lot different. It's not going to, suddenly make football games 59-56 or something like that. There really weren't that many more touchdowns, but at least it's something to try to restore what we had. It felt like we were on a pathway to 0 kickoffs and just say, hey, homie, here's the ball, 25, go do the thing.
And that would just kind of legislate something out of the game that has always been very exciting, but I certainly understand the safety option, and this is very exciting moving forward for the NFL. Let's talk a little bit about the other rule changes that maybe could be coming down. We talk about overtime. I'm a huge fan of college overtime. I think it's a very fair way and a quick way to settle a football game. Sometimes you get 7, 8, 9 overtimes, but those games get talked about for weeks and months and years after them. When it comes to overtime, do you anticipate that rule changing soon? And what is the hot button number 1 rule that you would change? Is it the fumble through the end zone rule?
I don't think overtime will change anytime soon. If they did, it would be making the new playoff rule where each team can have a chance to score a touchdown. I believe that would be applicable to the regular season. That would be the change, I think, the next step. I don't like the touchback rule. I'm on record saying that. And that's for every team, not just the Vikings. I just think it's dumb that a penalty for fumbling it when you're the ball carrier out of the end zone is losing the ball and the other team getting it. Like, it feels like it should be, 3rd and goal on the 20, and it just seems more fair that way. The one rule change that I wish could be instituted today is bring back a reasonable onside kick.
Yeah.
Or at least do the 4th and 25, whatever
4th
it
and
is.
20 from your own 20 or whatever. Yeah.
Because when your team is trying to mount a comeback, onside kick is now moot.
Yeah.
Like, especially now because you have to declare it and then try its futility on top of the new kick return rule. So it used to be fun, and I understand the player safety thing, but if it involves doing, hey, it's 4th and 20, so we're going to go ahead and try that, at least in the final 2 minutes of the game, it would feel like your team had a chance. Now, when it's like, hey, they're going to try an onside kick, I look at my wife and say, well, I ain't going to do anything.
Yeah, it's very rare that they ever get successful these days. Used to be like 10, 12, 14, 18% success, and now it's down to well under 10 and sometimes around 5% success for the onside kicks. And no more surprise onside kicks anymore either. Onside kicks have to occur in the fourth quarter, according to the NFL. That's the latest on rule changes. Vikings draft chatter. What is the latest there? And maybe some gamesmanship going on among the top 5 teams in the draft.
I was really excited to talk about this one. And so here for the listeners, 2 weeks ago, the Vikings traded with the Texans. They got an additional first-rounder for the price of 2 seconds and a late-round pick swap. And we looked around at each other and said, who now can the Vikings trade with? Is it going to be the Patriots? What about the Commanders? We weren't sure which team, if any, would do business with the Vikings. As of Sunday morning, and I kid you not, all of the teams not named the Bears, the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th team, all of them said their general managers, the head coach, came out and told reporters in some capacity, they said, we are open for business. We're going to listen to every single trade offer. There were some that got detailed about it, like Jared Mayo, that said the easiest way to build a winning roster is to have multiple draft picks. So we went from wondering, can the Vikings even get one of these teams to budge, to all of them are now willing to trade with any team, not just the Vikings. So it almost feels like there'll be competition to do business with the Vikings. I don't know if that will lower the trade cost, but it's a markedly different thing if the only team that will pick up the phone is, for example, the Patriots, because then you have to donate your first 3 rounders, and then that's that, maybe even something more. But if you have 4 teams jostling for the pick that would land McCarthy or May, the Vikings can go and pick the best offer, whereas we thought 2 weeks ago the Vikings were at the mercy of some other team even answering the phone. So I don't know if it's a coordinated effort, if it's a conspiracy, but it feels like it's a lot easier for the Vikings to trade today than it was 13 days ago or so.
Yeah, reportedly Washington, New England, Arizona, and perhaps the Chargers all, quote-unquote, open for business. Could you imagine, by the way, quickly as we go to break, could you imagine being the GM of the Washington Commanders and the entire organization if they just absolutely love Bo Nix or they absolutely love Michael Penix? We're picking 2nd overall. We have an opportunity to trade down, but we love this guy and the overall risk of trading down and losing him because I don't think a whole lot of teams value Penix and Nix in the top 5. But what if Chicago or D.C. or even New England is infatuated with that guy? You almost have to stay put and just take him and bite the bullet and rest on your laurels and trust your staff there. But imagine that scenario playing out within those draft war rooms. We're going to shift gears for the final segment coming up next. Quick one. We're talking baseball. We're talking favorite baseball movies and some picks for the season. We'll talk to Dustin about the LA Dodgers or the field this year, where he stands there, and the overall outlook for the Minnesota Twins. That's coming up next on this Thursday edition of Overtime.
Streaming live online and with the app, this is Overtime with Burt Ramin on ESPN 102.3 and AM 1000 KSOO, Sioux Falls sports leader.
Back Back with you. It's the Thursday edition of Overtime. Dustin Baker winding down his usual hour here on the program. Let's talk baseball as it's opening day. And for you Twins fans out there, you don't have to even bother to switch your dial this afternoon. And by the way, if you don't have it saved on your in your car as to where Twins baseball lives, it's right here on ESPN Sioux Falls, 102.3 FM, AM 1000, KSOO. Twins are in Kansas City, 2:30 pregame, 3:10 the first pitch later on this afternoon. Let's start here, though, Dustin, as we talk some baseball. I know you're a Twins guy at heart, but let's talk about baseball movies. For me, it's an obvious answer, and some people say not fully a baseball movie, but regardless, I'm going to roll with Sandlot as my favorite baseball movie. Field of Dreams, also another movie that people say, hey, that's not really a baseball movie. Yes, it is. It has baseball tied in. There's several great movies out there, but Field of Dreams and Sandlot are probably my two favorite baseball movies. Where do you stand? Are you a major league guy? Are you the natural guy, league of their own? Where do you go as far as best baseball movies, or maybe Moneyball?
Yeah. Oh, you stole it from me.
Oh, man. Right at the last second. I was guessing and waiting for the nod, and I finally got it.
Yeah, it's certainly Moneyball. So I think next to boxing, or on par with boxing, the baseball genre of movies and sports is probably the best. There's a lot of good boxing movies.
Yeah, it's so funny how boxing to me is not in my top 5, not in my top 6 or 7 favorite sports, believe it or not, but I love boxing movies.
Oh, yeah.
There's something about them.
Well, I think they're the oldest sports movie. I think going back to the origin of film, there's always been boxing movies, just ingrained in American culture. But no, Moneyball, directed by Bennett Miller. I loved that film when it came out because it introduced the world to just what in the heck sports analytics were. Because the Athletics, was it Billy Bean?
Yep.
Yeah, he was doing that back in 2002, and so I love everything about that movie. I learned a lot from it when it came out in 2011, I think. So there have been oodles of great baseball movies, especially some of the wholesome ones that you mentioned, like Field of Dreams. But in terms of entertainment value and film like production or the cinematic value, it's Moneyball for me.
Moneyball at the top of my list, too. Probably 3 or 4 at the least. But again, every time that gets mentioned or brought up, I'm like, gosh, I can't believe I didn't mention that movie or that movie. There's so many great baseball movies and sports movies in its entirety. And by the way, football, my favorite sport, without a doubt. I think football probably has below average movies as far as other sports go. And I don't know what that is, but basketball movies, pretty darn good. Boxing movies, tremendous. One of the best movies in sports that I've ever seen, UFC movie. I don't know if you've seen the movie Warrior, but fantastic with Tom Hardy in it. If you haven't seen that, check it out. It's a tearjerker. It's a tough, emotional ride, but it's fantastic. Warrior, I don't know where it's streaming right now, but I will always watch that movie when I see it on streaming if you haven't seen it. Major League Baseball this year, how you feeling about the Twins?
Decent. They didn't have a bang-up offseason in terms of signing free agents, but then again, they'd never really prioritized that. But hey, they did what I asked of them. They won a playoff game last year. I needed that for my embargo to be over. I could never get truly invested in Twins baseball because of that playoff drought. And it wasn't that, hey, you can't win a series. It was that you get swept every time you go there. And this is like since I was in college. So I was tickled that they won a single playoff game last year. And I'm optimistic about them this year, but I don't think it'll be parlayed into a World Series. I think their money line is about plus 2,000, which puts them like around 10th. Yeah. And then that Warrior movie you're talking about is phenomenal. There was a couple of years ago, either I watched it or my mom watched it, and whichever happened first, we were like, you got to watch this. Yeah. It's one of those movies that nobody's ever heard of, but it's an absolute gem. Yeah. So, yes, I'm with you. Was it Joel Edgerton, and there's one other dude. Who is
Tom Hardy's the main character, and that's just so phenomenal. And I forget the dad's name in that movie.
Oh, yeah, he's cool, too.
Unbelievable cast, and the one funny anecdote to go on that movie, I have a buddy whose dad is just noticeably, incredibly tough to read and very tough personality, so stoic and very almost unfriendly at this point, and does not show a lot of emotion. He never gets happy, never gets sad. He's just a square face and just, I'm going to be a grump and blah, 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 blah. He was watching that movie with my friend and his brother and that family, and his dad, the guy that never displays any emotion, is sitting there crying in the middle part of the movie. He's so mean to him. Why is he doing that? And he's crying like a baby, this guy that shows no emotion. So if you're looking for an emotional investment, Warriors the movie for you. Short anecdote there. AL Central over-under wins. We're going to dive into this in hour 2, but before we go, pick an over-under here. Minnesota Twins, they won 87 games last year. Vegas has them at 85.5, depending upon where you look. You going over or under? I still think they win the division, but do you think they eclipse that 87 number? And the odds are 85.5 right now.
I think they'll beat 85.5, but it won't be by much. I think 88, 89, kind of a redo of what they did last year, hopefully with a playoff series win. So, yeah, I do like the Twins this year. I like how they've built the roster, but it's just, I don't think it's quite good enough to go against the Titans of industry.
Minnesota Twins, Kansas City Royals, 2:30 pregame, 3:10 the first pitch time this afternoon right here on ESPN Sioux Falls. Dustin Baker, our guest for the entirety of another hour on a Thursday. By the time we talk next week, 3 weeks away, right, from the NFL draft. Can't wait for it. Thanks for the time, as always.
Yeah, the Vikings draft should really feel like, when we get there, the night before should feel like Christmas Eve for you guys and gals.
And can't wait for it again. Top-tier Vikings coverage across the board. Vikes Now at YouTube, VikingsTerritory.com, at Dust Baker on Twitter, and find Vikings Territory on Twitter at Viking Territory. Great stuff as always from Dustin Baker. We'll do it again in a week when we come back. Headlines and highlights, baseball odds, win totals, division odds, and my picks this year, including a win total for the Minnesota Twins. Jerry P. of the Sioux Falls Sports Authority and USD Coyote Women's Basketball will also swing by the show in hour number 2. We take the break. Back with that and more on Overtime.